let's talk about Texas, because what's happening at the southern border is absolutely dreadful. And there was a very disturbing, but I can see the legal positioning for it, ruling out of the Supreme Court yesterday, in which Texas, because we really are facing a true crisis at the southern border, and Texas is dealing with the brunt of it, just fed up at the total inaction at the feds. I mean, inaction would probably be a blessing. It's more like action to invite people in. So they decide to launch this operation. It included busing the illegals to sanctuary cities all over the country. That's working out very well. I think it's making the point brilliantly. But it also included trying to fortify the border to the extent Texas can. They put up razor wire. They put out sort of a barricade, these sort of big flotilla things in the water down there, which remain up. And then rather than just leave well enough alone, rather than say, this is a win for us at the federal level, Texas is going to take on this burden and we don't have to get it through Congress and we don't have to say it was us. The Biden administration goes in and sues them. They sued them over it, saying you got to take them down, take down the razor wire, take down the flotilla. Allegedly, we can't perform our duties of getting to the illegal immigrants as they're coming across the border. 3 died recently, but there's been testimony that they had died long before the feds ever could have gotten to them. In any event, they're trying to exploit it. And the Fifth Circuit, which is a more conservative federal court of appeals, voted in favor of Texas. And that's playing out. They've now, Texas, the government has now appealed to the Supreme Court. But while the appeal is pending, the government asked the Supreme Court to say the feds could take down the razor wire, that the razor wire had to come down, that these measures had to come down while they're litigating. And the Supreme Court just agreed. They just agreed 5-4. The 3 libs, Chief Justice Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett, voted together to say, yeah, you can take down those things while the case pens. Now, Texas could still win on the merits when this thing gets heard this term. But there's no question it was a blow, and it doesn't bode well for Texas that Barrett and Roberts voted this way, Rich. I don't see this as a politically good thing for Joe Biden at all, but it's just so far beyond the politics of it. I mean, really, the country's changing by the second. And there's already a crisis in city after city that's affecting kids. Right. They're not doing anything about it.
Yeah, so on the legalities here, I need to read the Fifth Circuit opinion. I haven't, but to the extent I follow this, the Supreme Court has been pretty adamant, pretty clear that just the federal government has total authority in the area of immigration enforcement. Now, what's perverse, right, is this is immigration non-enforcement or active lack of enforcement. But the federal government be able to make the case, what do they say? Like these barbed wires obstructing our border patrol agents, and whether that's BS or not, I think that if the federal government says that, the court is likely to accept it. But going back to the scenario that we're talking about with Biden, for the good of the party, if there were a clear successor, if Michelle Obama was willing to run, he should step aside. If he thinks the country's system of government is at stake in this election, he should do everything he can to defeat Trump. And the first thing should be removing himself from the equation. But if he's not going to do that, the second thing he should do is enforce the border, right? This is a yawning political vulnerability that he totally created out of discretion when he first came to office by removing all the Trump controls, and he could reinstate them, right? Or at least say, yeah, you know what, it is a crisis and we're going to deal with it. And his poll numbers in immigration, which are totally in the toilet, understandably, and is the main issue for Trump, or one of the main issues. And according to polling, was the biggest issue in the Iowa caucus and the biggest issue in the New Hampshire primary coming up here today. It would at least minimize the political vulnerability, but he won't do it. Now, there are some indications the numbers have been going down because the Mexicans have been discouraging people from coming over, apparently in reaction to talks that the Biden folks had with them in December. So that's better than the alternative. But why not do it yourself? You're in the United States government. This is what you're signed up to do. You took an oath of office to do. It's wrong, one, not to enforce the law. Two, it's straining jurisdictions all across the country. And it never should have just been on Texas. Yeah, Chicago should have part of this burden, in New York and Washington, D.C. Why not? It's a national problem. And three, there's a political element. So everything says enforce it. do your duty, but is not.
The problem is where the feds have legislated, the states aren't allowed to. I mean, it's basically a matter of federalism. Yeah. And the feds are saying, we're trying to enforce, this is how they're arguing it. The Solicitor General went in there and said, we're trying to perform our duties. We're trying to get to the illegal migrants as they're in the waters. And these fences and other barriers are stopping us from performing our federal duties. So you can't have a Texas law that creates a barrier between us and our federal responsibilities. And in the abstract, that's true. It just ignores the realities, Charlie, of what's actually happening at the southern border, which is, in all honesty, almost nothing from the feds. I'm sure the Border Patrol would like to do more, but they don't have the go-ahead from Joe Biden. In fact, the Biden administration has all but given a green light for people to run across the borders as long as they scream asylum, asylum.
Well, I think it's slightly more perverse than that. You mentioned legislation. It is true under our system of government that the federal government in this area trumps the states. That's a foundational principle within this area, which is covered by an enumerated power. But the executive branch is not following the law that Congress has written. And so what the executive branch is asking the states to do is not follow the law as it has been determined by the federal legislature, but follow the law as it is being interpreted, and in my view, misinterpreted or not enforced by the executive branch. That's a really weird problem to grapple with. It's a problem that starts in the White House, that is also to some extent on Congress's shoulders, because if Congress grew a pair, it could start to deprive the executive branch of things that it wants in exchange for enforcement. I'm actually less critical of the Supreme Court on this than others, especially of Amy Coney Barrett. I've seen a great deal of slings and arrows lobbed her way. I think they're premature. As you noted, this is not a decision on the merits. The merits were never reached. The question here is what happens before the merits are reached. I know that Amy Coney Barrett has criticized what she calls the shadow docket and the changing of policy without any explanation. We don't actually know what it is that she thinks or John Roberts thinks or the conservative justices on the other side think. Yeah, if it is the case that they ignore the law and give carte blanche to the Biden administration, I'll be disappointed. But until that happens, I think we just have to wait and see and reserve our opprobrium to where it belongs, which is Joe Biden, who, as Rich said, came into office and explicitly decided that he was going to open up a border that had been largely closed and that has not been dissuaded from this course of action by anything, including, inexplicably, his own self-interest. It's obviously in the interest of the Biden administration politically to fix this. The public hates Joe Biden on immigration and the broader Democratic Party on immigration. It's not just a presidential election year. It's also an election year in the Senate in many places. Texas has a Senate election. Arizona has a Senate election. If you look at the last round of House races in 2022, Republicans did pretty well in California. If they do pretty well in California again in 2024, it'll be more difficult for Democrats to take back the House. This is one of those examples of where fringe ideology has captured the Democratic Party to such an extent that it just can't act in its own interests. It can't get out of its own way. I blame Joe Biden for that. To a slightly lesser extent, I blame Congress. I'm not ready yet to blame the Supreme Court.
Sorting through your expense tracking, estimated payments, and all those deductions is overwhelming. It might lead to a failure to file or failure to pay penalties that pile up on your tax debt. Here's an idea for you. The attorneys at Tax Network USA have been lifesavers for many. Their team has successfully saved clients over $1 billion in tax debts. Whether you're in the hole for 10 grand or staring at a $10 million debt, they are there and ready to help you. Even if you haven't filed in 1, 5, or even 10 years, the expert attorneys and tax pros at Tax Network USA are equipped to secure the best settlement for you and to help you resolve all tax cases no matter how they started. Go to tnusa.com/Megyn. tnusa.com/Megyn, or call 1-800-245-6000. Contact them now as these tax debt relief programs are expected to change. Again, it's tnusa.com/Megyn, or just call 1-800-245-6000 and tell them Megyn Kelly sent you. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.